Welcome to part one of the dynamic lion. Now in this section you can see I have transferred my drawing to my gray velour paper, and I'm using my 9B graphite pencil to go over the lines carefully and make sure that I have a good solid drawing before I start the pastel process. You can see my reference photo just out of camera range over on the left. I got the photo in the public domain, and it's also available from Pixabay at no charge, so I don't mind showing it in this video since it is a free photo reference. So I'm going to just continue to firm up my line drawing. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. I think you get the general idea. So I'm always using my reference photo and working from that. That helps me to get an accurate drawing and accurate shapes before I start the actual painting process. Now I've speeded up the video a little bit to show you the continuing of the pencil drawing process. And I take the time to do this because it teaches me about the shapes in my painting before I paint them. It helps me to get familiar with my subject, and I urge you to take the time to do this instead of jumping right in to the painting. Now, as I said before, this is the 9B graphite pencil, and in the next step I'll be using my charcoal pencil. In this next step, I'm using a 6B charcoal pencil to go over the important lines around the eyes and the nose and the mouth, and some of the other areas I want to reinforce so that they're not lost when I add the initial layers of pastel. So I'm carefully doing that. I want to make sure that I can see these lines, and they will show up through the subsequent layers of pastel if I take the time to add them now. So again, using my reference, I'm carefully going around the eye, putting in the pupil and the other areas of the drawing. I've sped this portion of the video up a bit where you can see me put in the rest of my charcoal lines before we start to add color. I'm not putting every line in charcoal, only those that I feel are important, that will act as a marker for where I'm going to next. So I want to get in around the eyes and the nose and some of the very darkest layers and areas, and they act as a map and a guide for me throughout my painting. Now in this section, I am working around the bottom of the lion's face. You can see I've completed both eyes and the dark areas on the right and the left side. So now I'm going around and outlining the nose area and the whisker holes and putting all the other little tiny darks in before we start adding color. Now, after adding all the black charcoal, I'm now using a white charcoal pencil to add a few white hairs, just a few, to show me where the white hairs are on my painting. Now the white charcoal will show through the pastel as well, so use it sparingly. Just a few hairs in the bottom of his beard and on the side of his face. I also used it to put in some highlights in the eyes. I use it on the rim around the eyes for highlights as well. Now that we're finished with our underdrawing, we can start layering in some color. Now this is Rembrandt 231.5 Gold Ochre. I'm putting that on the right side of the lion's face. And I'm going to put a little bit on the left as well. Now I didn't use any under layers of gray. I am using these colors as our base layer. If you've been to my classes or seen other videos, you know that pastel adheres to itself differently than to the raw paper, so we usually put a base coat down. But for this project, we're going to use color for our base coat. So this is our 231.5 that I've put down generally all over, but not solidly on the lion, avoiding the nose and the eyes. Now this is 411.5. or burnt sienna. Now I'm putting it on the right side of the face. The lion is brown, so I want it to be brown, but I'm going to make it more colorful. So in the darker, more shadowed areas, I'm using more of the burnt sienna and still avoiding the eyes and the nose at this point. I'm continuing to add the 411.5 burnt sienna. I'm using it on the end to just kind of add some color. Now I'm going to add some hot pink. This is 318.7 Carmine that I'm adding to the right side of the lion. It's just a really bright hot pink. I wanted to do something different. I'm not putting it all over. I'm just putting it in selected areas. I'm using the 231.5 gold ochre to kind of smooth things out a little bit. If I get too heavy-handed, I can do that. And this is the 411.5, so I'm going back and adding a little stronger red-brown color to the area. This is my 318.7 Carmine, adding a little more pink. And a little bit of the gold ochre, 231.5, around the eyes. And now we're going to add some shadow areas, and we're going to add the shadow areas with red violet. And now this is Art Spectrum 517 Flinders Red Violet, if you have that. If you don't have that, you can use any red violet. You can use 346 NuPastel Bordeaux. You can use Holbein Red Violet or any medium to hard pastel. And then I'm smoothing that out with a little 411.5 Burnt Sienna. Now this is 305 NuPastel Spruce Blue. So I'm adding the blue over the red violet to make a more complex dark. I like since this is a colorful lion, I like the combination of the red violet and the blue. Now I've picked up a Rembrandt. This is 508.5 Prussian blue, and I'm using it on the end to go over the red violet and to add areas of shadow that I see in my reference photo. Be sure and work from your reference photo. And these are the combinations we're going to be using for shadows. Either the 305 Spruce Blue NuPastel and 346 Bordeaux NuPastel, or the 508.5 Prussian Blue in the Flinders Red Violet. So what we're getting is a red, blue, violet color. And if you need a smaller, this is the NuPastel 305. So this gives us a point and works in a smaller area. So I go back and forth between the two till I get the effect that I want. So I'm working down the face with the 508.5 Rembrandt Prussian Blue, and then using my 305 Spruce Blue to darken it a bit. I don't think it's quite dark enough. So again, I'm working over the painting to add the darks with the red violet and the dark blue. Here I'm using the NuPastel Bordeaux 346 to add red violet. The difference between the NuPastel and the Rembrandt is that the NuPastel is harder. It's a harder pastel. The color is very, very similar. So use what you have available. This works very well together. I like this. I'm going to leave this in real time so that you see how I develop these shadows. I alternate between the blue and the red violet. Put one down and one over the top. I don't think it really matters which one you use first because they blend together. Now the Rembrandt 508.5 Prussian blue has a lot of, the blues sometimes are really hard and you have to sand them quite often to get the color off. So when it stops marking on the paper, sand it a little bit, but be sure and wipe it off after you sand it so you don't get too much color on your paper. Now I'm going underneath the lion's chin with the Prussian blue 508.5 Rembrandt and the Art Spectrum red violet. If you don't have Art Spectrum red violet, you could also use the Rembrandt blue and then use the Bordeaux NuPastel over it. Sometimes I just snap a piece off and sand it and use that on its side. See here I'm using the NuPastel. I'm taking my time to get those colors just like I want them. Now I'm working on top of the nose with the red violet, putting in the shadows that I see there. And over on the right-hand side, I'm adding a little red violet over there as well. So again, to just go over it, all of our darks are going to be made with the red violet and the blue. And when we want to go darker in certain areas, we'll add a little black on top of that. But we want to keep this colorful look to our lion. So I've put in all the red violet on the right-hand side, and I'm going over that with my Rembrandt 508.5 Prussian blue and a 305 spruce blue NuPastel. Sometimes I use the end of the NuPastel. You can see I'm using the flat end, and that works very well. I want you to notice here as I put in the blue, you can see the white lines that I put in with my white charcoal pencil. So that shows me where the edge of the lion's face is going to be, and this is going to be very helpful. Now I'm adding another blue. This is 570.5 Rembrandt Phthalo blue. It's a brighter blue, and I'm putting it on the right side of the lion to give a little variety of color. I like that blue, and I'm going to go over that with the 508.5 Prussian blue Rembrandt. And that looks very nice and gives us a nice complex variation of blue colors. Now I have a little piece of 305 spruce blue that I broke off the end of a NuPastel and sanded the side, and that's what I'm using to darken that bottom area. The spruce blue is darker than the Rembrandt blue, so I'm using it to darken that area. And then over that, I'm adding a little bit of black. This is 700.5 Rembrandt black. It's a beautiful black. It's soft and velvety, and we want it to be a little bit darker down in that area. And so that's why I'm adding that black, but just a little bit. I don't want it to turn too gray or muddy. So be sparing in your use. This is the Bordeaux. I'm adding a little more color with that. A little more red violet up in the corner. This is where mane is going to be, some of the dark shadows in the mane. Here I'm adding some blue over the red violet that I placed earlier. Now I have my 570.5 phthalo blue. I'm adding a little color over the bridge of the nose. I want to use as many bright colors as I can. A little Art Spectrum red violet over that. Now on this inside of the lion's muzzle, this is going to be slightly in shade. I'm putting blue on both sides, on the right and the left. We'll add more color to that area later. Now I have my 231.5 gold ochre, and I'm going to fill in the beard underneath the lip of the lion. I'm going to put the darker 411.5 burnt sienna on the left side, and I'm going to use my pink, my 318.7 carmine on the right side. So we're using the same colors that we used in the face. And a little more blue right there at the mouth. I'm using the 508.5 Prussian blue to darken that area where at the bottom of the mouth and underneath the beard. I'm using my black NuPastel to darken that just a little bit. And a little more 700.5 Rembrandt black over on the right side to darken it a little bit more. Just make gradual changes and adjustments and build up the pastels slowly. A little more black in here. In this section, I'm adding a little more red violet and blue to get it a little bit darker down at the bottom before we proceed with the face. I'm adding the 570.5 phthalo blue And we'll get back to finish this side of the painting, but I want to finish the inside of the lion's face first. The darker blue, 508.5 Rembrandt Prussian blue, also the red violet, and a little bit of black to darken that down, especially close up to the face there. And there I'm using 305 spruce blue. Now we're going to work on the eyes. So I have my 305 spruce blue NuPastel, and I'm going to outline the eyes with the spruce blue, and then I'm going to add 229 black over top. With the white charcoal pencil, the highlight on the rim. And now I'm going over the blue with my 229 black. And the reason I'm doing that is because the black and the blue together make a richer black than just the black by itself. And again, I'm adding a little white accent with my white charcoal pencil. I have also placed a piece of paper for my hand to rest on to keep my hand out of the pastel that I put down to keep from smearing it. Now I'm going to color in my iris with 253 Cocoa Brown. And I'm just coloring that in flat, just like you would color in a coloring book. Just coloring the entire area with Cocoa Brown. Next, I'm going to use 263 Indian Red to color around the top of the eyeball and iris and around the pupil. And this will start to help develop dimension in our eye. So it's not all over, it's just around the pupil and up towards the top. And now I have 353 Cordovan. We need to go darker still. So I'm putting the Cordovan at the very top of the eyeball on the iris underneath that lid area. So that helps to create a shadow. And I'm getting it very dark in there. Now I have my 229 black to go darker still just at the top of the eye. And you can see that really adds to the dimension of the eye. I'm adding a little more Cordovan right around the pupil area and where the highlight is. And I'm darkening the pupil with the 229 black. And now I'm using 266 Pale Vermilion to add the red color down at the bottom of, on the right side of this eye. And to brighten that up, I'm going to add 207 Chrome Yellow over that. And the two colors together make a beautiful orange color that you can't get just by using orange alone. It's a much more complex color. If you want it a little brighter, push a little bit harder with your yellow. If you want it a little more orange, you can add a little more red. And now I'm going to add the bright highlight with the point of a 211 NuPastel, which is white. And now I'm going to add the right eye just like I did the left one, following the same steps, starting with the 305 blue. And you can see my colors down there at the bottom of the screen. We'll be using Cocoa Brown to fill in the iris. Then we will add darker color with 263 Indian Red. Go even darker with 353 Cordovan. And also 229 Black. And then we'll add the highlights with 266 Pale Vermilion and 207 Chrome Yellow, all NuPastels. This is the perfect way to paint any brown eye. Now, if you see green in your eye or you want to add green, then pick out a couple of shades of NuPastel green, a dark one and a medium one, and use it the same way that we use the browns, just use the greens. And you might want to add a little brown to that too, so it's not too bright a green. You can go back and readjust your colors, add a little more chrome yellow or a little more black, or make your highlight a little brighter, however you want to do it. Now I'm going to add some 343 Rust, which is very red, it's the counterpart in NuPastel to the 411.5 Burnt Sienna. It's a little harder and it's a little easier to hold in my hand, and I can get a little more detail with it. So I'm going to add this red in the shadow areas around the eye to start deepening the color values on the right side of the lion. And now I've switched to 263 Indian Red to go a little bit darker. Back to the 343 Rust. Now I've switched to the 411.5 Rembrandt just to add a little heavier color to these areas on the lion's face. Now let's paint the nose of our lion. I'm going to put a piece of paper down for my hand to rest on, and I'm going to outline it with 305 Spruce Blue. After I outline it, I fill it in with the 305 Spruce Blue. It's not super heavy. I'm kind of light in my application, and I want to make sure that my nostrils still show. So I drew the line kind of heavy, and you might not be able to see that in the recording, the difference between the nostrils and the nose, but I can see it on the painting, which is important because I want to keep that area separate, the nostril, and darker. Now I'm using 229 black to go over the nose and add another layer of color. I will use more black in the nostrils when we get to that part. I'm dragging down a few strokes of the dark blue into the muzzle of the lion, just on the edges. And now I'm taking the Rembrandt 508.5 Prussian blue and darkening that area. And see what kind of depth and dimension that adds when I darken it. This is the black, 229 black, that I'm using to just pull that little edge down into the mouth, into the muzzle, from the nose into the muzzle area. Now I'm using 700.5 Rembrandt to make the nose even blacker. It's a velvety black and it just adds a lot of dimension to it. And this is the 570.5 Phthalo blue. I'm using it to put the little cleft in the nose. You can't see it very much, but it's there. So using the edge of the 570.5 Phthalo blue to put in the highlight on the edge of the nostril. It was the best choice of color. It's there without being too strong. I'm straightening up my edge with a 229 black. And now I'm going to put some pink spots on the nose. I'm going to use the 306 Orchid Pink. I'm just using the corner of it to add pink to the nose. The amount of pink on the nose in a lion tells the age. The older the lion gets, the more pink it gets on its nose. So we're just putting a little pink on the nose. And now it's time to add some more darks, go a little bit darker in our shadows, and I'm going to use the 229 black NuPastel. I'm going to use the edge of the stick and make little short black hairs in the forehead. Just going back and forth over the red, violet, and the blue that we put down previously. We have to get our shadows and our darks in before we can add our lights. Our lights won't show up. Now this is the Bordeaux, the 346 NuPastel Bordeaux. Added a little bit of that over that. This is the same color, it's just a bigger stick. And we're back to the black. So I'm using 305 blue, 229 black, and 346 Bordeaux, increasing the dark areas on the face of the lion, alternating between those three colors. .5 Prussian blue, and I'm using the end of it. And I don't want little lines, so that's why I'm using the Rembrandt. I'm getting a smoother look there. And this is the Art Spectrum Red Violet. You can also use a little piece of your NuPastel Bordeaux to add the same color. Just getting that nice and smooth. I'm using the tip of my black NuPastel to just pull out a few hairs. I don't need a lot of hairs, just a few. I'm continuing to add darks, particularly with the 229 black. I'm concentrating on the right side of the lion's face right now. And I am using the tip. I'm not real concerned with straight little lines. We don't want to concentrate on lines. We want it to have a more impressionistic look. We're getting in the darks, and then we will add the lighter, brighter hairs on top. Using my 346 Bordeaux NuPastel to darken around the bottom of the right side. It needs to be darker so that my light hairs are going to show up. So I'm just adding another pale layer of red violet to this area. Adding a few more darks with the edge of my 305 blue. And going slowly, sometimes using the base. Just always keep in mind I'm using my reference photo to determine where I'm putting these darks. I can't stress that enough. And now I'm adding a little more bright pink with the 318.7. So you can see we've added a little more red violet. We have really gone darker with this side of the painting. Look how that eye glows. Adding a little more dark blue with the 508.5 Prussian blue. I want to make sure that we go dark enough before we add our light colors. Join me for part 2 of the Dynamic Lion, where we add our lights to the right side of this face.